Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to tackle something that I think every association and nonprofit out there grapples with, and that's good communication.
It's such a fundamental aspect, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, to make things even more interesting, we're going to do this deep dive with a little bit of a twist.
Oh, I like twists.
Our source material today is a Spanish guidebook.
Okay.
It's called, and get this, goodcommunication.txt.
Straightforward. I like it.
Yeah, pretty quirky title, right?
Yeah.
But don't let that fool you. This thing is packed with practical advice, especially for organizations like the ones our listeners are part of.
I've had a chance to peek at it, and I think they're going to get a lot out of this.
Oh, definitely. It jumps right in, starts with what it calls a warning for navigators.
Ooh, sounds ominous.
Right. But it's basically acknowledging that good communication, it often forces change and growth.
Which can be uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. And even, feel a little risky sometimes. Like, are we really ready to rock the boat?
Exactly. It's that fear of the unknown, that stepping outside of our comfort zones.
But the guide makes this really compelling argument, and I'm curious to get your take on it. It says that staying silent or doing things the same old way, just sticking with the status quo, is actually riskier in the long run.
I completely agree, especially in today's world. The landscape for nonprofits is constantly shifting. I mean, think about the challenges they face. Funding cuts, increased demand for services.
A lot.
It is, and technology that's constantly evolving, they need to adapt, and good communication is essential for that.
It's not just an option anymore. It's like
Yeah.
survival.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to get your message out there in a way that resonates, that connects with people.
So true. And you know what I love about this guide?
Is that?
It's not afraid to call out those common excuses we all hear. And let's be honest, maybe even use ourselves sometimes. The classics like nobody reads flyers anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's a common one. Or word of mouth is enough. We've all heard those.
Oh, I've definitely fallen into that trap before.
I think we all have at some point.
But what's great about this guide is that it digs deeper. It asks, okay, why don't people read flyers?
Right. There's usually a reason. Maybe they're too generic or poorly designed, or maybe they just don't speak to the audience's needs and interests.
Exactly. And it tackles that word of mouth excuse too, doesn't it?
It does. It points out that relying solely on word of mouth is kind of like playing a game of telephone.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
The message can get distorted as it passes from person to person. You lose control of the narrative, and that can be risky.
Especially for nonprofits who are trying to build trust, establish credibility.
Yeah.
You really need to control that message.
Absolutely. You want to make sure that the information that's out there about your organization is accurate and consistent.
Okay, so we've debunked some common communication myths, and now I'm really excited to dig into what this guide calls the 7 Is. It's basically a framework for effective communication.
Okay, let's hear it.
And the first I is identification. So it's pretty basic, right?
Back to basics.
But it's more than just, slapping your logo on something. It's about really knowing yourself, like deeply.
Self-awareness is so important for individuals and organizations.
The guide even suggests a self-assessment activity. What are some of the key questions that nonprofits should ask themselves during this self-discovery phase?
Well, first and foremost, it's all about getting to the heart of your organization's identity. What's your core mission? What values drive your work? And what are your strengths?
Okay, so like a SWOT analysis almost. Strengths, weaknesses, all of that.
Exactly. And don't shy away from the weaknesses. It's important to acknowledge those as well. And then crucially, what's your communication style as an organization?
So thinking about the voice and tone, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Are you formal? Are you informal? Are you playful? Are you serious? Understanding this will shape how your message is received.
Okay, so lots to uncover there. It sounds like a lot of work up front, but I can see how it would pay off.
I think so, too. It's like building a house. You wouldn't build a house on a shaky foundation, right?
Makes sense.
Same with communication. You need that solid understanding of who you are as an organization.
Okay, good point. So once you got that firm grasp of who you are, the next I is investigation.
Ooh, sounds intriguing. What's that all about?
And this is where things get really interesting, at least for me. This is about research, but not just any research.
Okay, I'm listening.
This guide recommends digging into government data, looking at academic studies, even checking out what other nonprofits are doing. I was surprised by this. It's like, go broad, get all the intel you can.
I love that approach. It's so important not to get stuck in your own bubble. There's so much valuable information out there, and it can really inform your communication strategy.
I totally agree. You can't just assume you know your audience, right?
Exactly. And by looking at what others are doing, both inside and outside of your sector, you can glean inspiration, learn from their successes, and even their mistakes.
True. But I can imagine this feeling, kind of overwhelming, especially for smaller nonprofits with limited staff and resources.
Oh, for sure. Research can be time-consuming. But the guide does offer some practical tips, like reaching out to local universities or research institutions. They often have students or faculty who are eager to collaborate.
Oh, that's a great idea. Partnerships. Okay, that makes it a little less daunting. So investigation, it's about getting that outside perspective. Now on to the third I. This one seems a bit more straightforward. It's interest.
Interests. Okay. I think I can guess where this is going.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is about aligning your organization's goals with what your audience actually cares about.
Makes sense. You need to speak to people in a way that resonates with their needs and values.
Right. The guide uses a metaphor here, and I absolutely love it. It says, don't try to sell a motorcycle to someone who needs a bicycle.
Oh, I love that. It's so clear and concise.
Right. So simple, but so powerful. Can you give us a real-world example of what that might look like, in the nonprofit world?
Sure. Let's say you're a food bank and you're partnering with a local school to recruit volunteers.
Okay. Classic need for nonprofits. Always need volunteers.
Right. Now, instead of just blasting out this generic message about, we need help, come volunteer, think about what might appeal to those students. Maybe highlight the educational benefits.
Okay, so like, come learn about nutrition.
Exactly. Or gain experience in logistics and community organizing. You're appealing to their interests and offering them something valuable in return.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Mm.
So you're not just asking for help, you're creating this win-win situation.
Exactly. And that makes your message much more compelling.
Okay, I'm loving these eyes so far. What's the next one?
The next one is interlocutors.
Interlocutors. Okay, so breaking that down, it's about understanding that you're not communicating with just one big blob of people, right?
Exactly. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to communication. This I is all about recognizing that there are different groups that you need to tailor your message to.
I see. So who are these different groups?
Well, the guide actually breaks it down into 5 key categories: promoters, target audience, supporters, legitimizers, and then amplifiers.
Okay, 5 categories. We've got a lot to unpack there. But first, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment to dive deeper into those interlocutors and the rest of the 7IS. All right, so we're back and ready to tackle the rest of these IS. We left off talking about different interlocutors, basically, all those groups you need to communicate with. We've got our promoters, target audience, supporters, legitimizers, and amplifiers, right?
You got it. 5 key players in the communication game, and each one needs a slightly different approach.
Okay, so let's break them down one by one, starting with those promoters. Who are we talking about here?
Think of promoters as your inner circle, your staff, your volunteers, board members, anyone who's already on board with your organization's mission.
Okay, so those folks are already in a loop, pretty much.
Yeah.
What's the key to communicating with them well?
The guide emphasizes creating a culture of open communication. Make sure everyone feels heard and valued, that their input matters.
So it's like regular team meetings, updates, opportunities to give feedback, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And it's not just about top-down communication either.
Right, not just the bosses talking at people.
It's about creating those spaces where folks can brainstorm together, share ideas, raise concerns, really collaborate effectively.
That makes sense. All right, next up, target audience. Now, this is who most people think of when they think communication, right? The people you're directly trying to reach.
Yep. This is the group your organization is ultimately serving.
But how does communicating with them differ from communicating with those internal promoters we were just talking about?
Well, your target audience might not be as familiar with your work, right? You might need to spend a little more time explaining who you are, what you do, why it matters to them.
Oh, that's a good point. And I imagine the actual style you use has to be tailored to them too, right?
Absolutely. If you're working with kids, for example, your communication's going to look a lot different than if you're targeting, say, senior citizens or business leaders.
Yeah, you got to speak their language, so to speak.
Exactly. You need to understand their demographics, their cultural backgrounds, what kind of information they're actually looking for.
All right, target audience, check. Who are we on to next? The supporters, right?
Right. These are your allies, basically. Other organizations, community groups, even just individuals who are aligned with your cause and want to help out.
Okay, so how do we talk to these folks effectively?
The guide emphasizes building genuine partnerships here. It can't just be a one-way street where you're constantly asking for favors.
I see. So it's more about finding those win-win situations where you're both benefiting.
Exactly. Maybe you're collaborating on a project, sharing resources, amplifying each other's messages. And always remember that communication with supporters should be two-way. You got to listen to their ideas and concerns just as much as you share your own.
Great advice. Now let's move on to the legitimizers. Who are we talking about here, and why are they so important?
Legitimizers are those individuals or institutions who kind of lend credibility to your organization, right? They give you that stamp of approval.
Okay, so think funders, government officials, maybe academics, or even celebrities who endorse your work.
Precisely. They're the folks who can really boost your reputation and help build trust with the public.
Yeah, they're like a walking, talking testimonial almost. So how do we make sure we're communicating with them effectively?
Transparency and accountability are key here.
Okay, makes sense.
Be clear about how you're using their funding, share your impact data, be upfront about both your successes and your challenges.
Don't try to sugarcoat things.
Exactly. Honesty goes a long way.
Makes sense. Okay, last but not least, we've got the amplifiers. Now, I'm guessing this is all about getting your message out there on a larger scale.
You got it. Amplifiers are basically your megaphone to the world.
Okay, so think media outlets, social media influencers, bloggers, anyone with a large audience, basically.
Exactly. They're the ones who can help you reach a wider audience than you could ever reach on your own.
So how do we make sure we're giving them the right stuff to amplify, so to speak?
The guide encourages nonprofits to think a little bit like journalists here.
Oh, I like
What's
her.
the hook? What's the human interest angle? Why should people care about your story?
You got to make it newsworthy, right?
Exactly. And remember, different amplifiers have different audiences and preferences. What works on TikTok might not fly in the New York Times.
All right, that makes sense. We've covered a lot of ground here with these interlocutors. Really highlights how much thought goes into strategic communication. It's not just about blasting out the same message to everyone and hoping for the best.
Absolutely. You need to be targeted, intentional. Each audience is unique, and your message needs to reflect that.
Okay, so we've tackled the interlocutors. What's the next I? It's imagination.
You got it. And this one's a bit more, well, imaginative than the others.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It encourages you to think about your organization as a piece of music, an animal, or even a color.
Okay, that is a little different.
I know, right? Sounds a bit out there at first.
But I'm willing to play along. What's
Okay.
the point of this exactly?
It's all about tapping into the feeling of your organization, not
Yeah.
just the logistics.
Oh, okay. So like if my organization were a piece of music, would it be, I don't know, a triumphant symphony or a catchy pop song? Is that what we're getting at?
Exactly. Those choices reveal a lot about your tone, your personality as an organization.
And same with the animal thing, right? Like a fierce lion versus a playful otter. Those project very different vibes.
Exactly. And this exercise, it forces you to think about those qualities, those characteristics you want to project to the world, which is essentially what branding is all about, right?
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Branding's not just about a logo.
Oh,
It's about the whole feeling, the impression you create. All right, so we're getting all touchy-feely with this imagination eye. What's next?
the sixth eye is where we start getting a little more practical. It's all about ideas.
Okay, so we've had our fun. Now back to business.
Well, sort of. This is about taking those imaginative insights we just talked about and putting them into action.
Ah, I see. So this is where we talk websites, social media, email campaigns, events, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And this guide's got a super helpful table that lists a whole bunch of different tools and techniques. Some are traditional, some are a little more outside the box.
Ooh, outside the box. Always love that. Any examples come to mind?
Well, it even mentions things like street theater,
Whoa.
community murals, flash mobs, even gift giving. It's about thinking creatively, finding those unexpected ways to engage people.
I love that. It's like, don't limit yourself to the usual boring stuff.
Exactly. Now, with all these options out there, it can be tough to choose the right tools for the job. The guide emphasizes that you gotta really think about your goals and your audience. What are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to reach? And what's gonna resonate with them?
Okay, that makes sense. So if I'm trying to raise awareness, maybe I go for a big social media push. But if I'm trying to, I don't know, deepen relationships with existing donors, maybe it's more about personalized emails or invitations to a special event.
Exactly. You got to be strategic, intentional with your choices.
All right, on to the last and I think this one's no surprise to anyone, internet. I mean, come on, it's 2024.
Right. But the guide doesn't just say, have a website and call it a day. It goes deeper, emphasizes interaction.
Ooh, interesting. So it's not enough to just be present online. You got to actually be engaging with people, right?
Exactly. You want to create a dynamic online space, where folks can interact with your content, share their thoughts, even connect with each other.
Okay, so how do we make that happen? What are some practical ways to make our online presence more interactive?
The guide suggests incorporating online surveys to get feedback from your audience, which is always great. You can also create active comment sections on your website, social media, encourage dialogue that way.
Love that. Two-way conversations, not just us talking at people.
Exactly. And another idea, using live chat features on your website. Answer questions in real time, provide immediate support. It makes people feel heard.
Yeah, it feels more personal, more responsive.
Yeah.
All right, so internet. It's not just about being there. It's about how you use that space to connect with people. So we've covered all 7 I's. It's a lot of ground. But there's one more really crucial section we got to talk about, and it's all about the power of language. And we'll get into that right after a quick break. All right, we're back and wrapping up our deep dive into goodcommunication.txt, and I'm ready to talk about language. It's something that underpins all those 7 I's we just went through. Yeah.
Absolutely. This guide really stresses the power of clear, inclusive language, especially for nonprofits. It's essential, really.
It's about making sure everyone feels seen, heard, respected, no matter their background or identity.
Exactly. It's about building trust, creating a sense of belonging, and ensuring your message reaches the widest possible audience.
And, the guide points out something I think a lot of us overlook, how even subtle wording choices can reveal underlying biases or assumptions we might not even realize we have.
It's true. Like, one example that really stuck with me was saying my board instead of the board.
Oh,
It
interesting.
seems like such a small thing,
Yeah.
right? But it can convey this sense of ownership and control that might not be intended. It can create a distance between leadership and the rest of the organization.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it that way. It's like those microaggressions people talk about. They seem small, but they add up.
Exactly. And the guide also cautions against using jargon, or overly technical language that could alienate people who aren't already familiar with your field.
It's about striking that balance between being, professional and credible, but also approachable and understandable.
Absolutely. You don't want to sound like you're reading from a textbook. You want to connect with people on a human level.
So how do we get better at this? Is it just about memorizing a list of good words and bad words?
I don't think it's about being perfect, honestly. Language is constantly evolving, and we're all learning as we go.
Okay, that's reassuring. So it's more about having that awareness, being open to feedback, and constantly trying to do better.
Exactly. And remember, being inclusive with your language isn't just about political correctness, it's about effectiveness. It's about making sure your message is heard and understood by the people you're trying to reach.
All right, I love that. So we've talked practical strategies, we've talked language, and now the guide gets a little philosophical with a story about a princess.
Ah, yes, the princess who's lured away from her simple, joyful life by the promise of luxury and status. It's a classic tale.
And surprisingly relevant to nonprofits, at least that's what the guide argues. So what's the takeaway here? What does this princess have to teach us about communication?
Well, the guide suggests that nonprofits can sometimes fall into the same trap as this princess. We can get so focused on chasing funding, media attention, awards, all that external validation.
Yeah, all the shiny stuff.
Right. And in the process, we might lose sight of what truly matters. Our core mission, our values, the people we serve.
And when that happens, our communication starts to feel, I don't know, inauthentic maybe, like we're trying to sell something we don't actually believe in anymore.
Exactly. The guide is reminding us that the most powerful communication comes from a place of authenticity. When you're deeply connected to your purpose, your values, that passion shines through and people can feel it.
Okay, so it's not just what you say, but why you're saying it. People can sense that, the genuineness.
Absolutely. And that leads to a really powerful point the guide makes. It is impossible not to communicate. Full stop. Right there.
Okay, wow. So even when we're not saying anything, we're still communicating something, right?
Exactly. Every choice we make, every action we take, even our silences, they all send a message.
So we better make sure that message is one worth hearing. This whole guide has been packed with insights. Any final takeaways you want to leave our listeners with today?
For me, it's all about action. Knowledge is power, but only if we actually put it to use. So my challenge to everyone listening is choose one of these 7 I's, just one, and spend 15 minutes this week applying it to your organization.
Love that.
You might be surprised what you uncover.
Great advice. And remember, communication is a journey, not a destination. It's about constantly striving to improve, to connect more authentically, and to use our voices to make a difference in the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on another deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and keep those communication channels open and flowing.